Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. In this video, we'll be covering the best tips for each class in Baldur's Gate 3. Each class has something they specialize in, and with the holiday season around, I figure there's a lot of new players to Baldur's Gate 3, so I want to boil down just one tip for each of the classes to get the most out of them. Now, the first one we're starting off with is the Barbarian. Naturally, they're very tanky, and a little bit different in how they work. This is because you typically don't want to wear armor with a Barbarian. You're going to want to wear clothing, so something like that. You can get a pretty high armor class because we add our Constitution modifier. So if you start the game off with 16 Constitution, that's a +3 to your armor class. Then if you have 16 Dexterity, that's going to give you another +3 to your armor class. Now, the trick is here, armor class isn't everything when it comes to the Barbarian. They also take half physical damage. And this is where you might not want to use items that boost your armor class on a Barbarian because the higher your armor class, the less likely the enemies are to attack you. For example, like the Ring of Protection, probably better on anyone else like your Cleric or your Wizard because we don't really want our armor class to be crazy high, plus we're already going to get it very high enough. We want to actually draw the enemy's aggro towards us by dropping our armor class a little bit. We also get a level 2 advantage on Dexterity saving throws, traps, spells, and surfaces, meaning Fireball is much less likely to attack us if we're not blinded or incapacitated. So I guess to boil this down for a tip for the Barbarian is you might want to drop your armor class a little bit lower and focus on just drawing aggro towards your character. Now, if you play the Wild Heart Barbarian and pick the Bear Heart, you get a special version of the Rage with the Bear Heart, which makes you resistant to every damage type except for Psychic, which is obviously very strong when you can block out half of every point of damage that comes your way. Now, one other thing differs in their armor class calculation. The Monk also has the same ability, but they add their Wisdom modifier onto their armor class, but they can't use a shield. We can use a shield, however. So it kind of boils down to what you want to accomplish here, but I'd actually recommend trying to have your armor class lower. So maybe using a two-handed weapon, building around your Constitution so you get higher armor class through that way, but also giving yourself more health points to deal. It's a resource to use to protect your teammates with. So ideally in the late game, you'd be using like Great Weapon Master with a two-handed sword. I personally really like the Sword of Chaos because this will heal you for up to 6 health points on hit. But we can further take that another step with the Perioptic Wound Closure, which you can get in Act 1, making you regain the maximum amount of health points. So you're going to be getting 6 health points per melee attack. This is great because we can actually drop our armor class really low if we wanted to, and while using this, we're going to be protecting our team. And that's not to say you shouldn't use a shield, but sometimes you want to think about your armor class. If it's lower than your Wizard's going to get hit less, which means they hold their concentrations, and your Barbarian can just run in and soak up a bunch of damage. And yeah, that's probably the best way to go about using them. Next up is the Bard, my favorite class in the game, and I just recently made a modded subclass, the College of Winter Spirit. I recommend you check that out, but my tip for the Bard is kind of a funny one. They're a jack of all trades, master of none. However, they can actually also be a master as well. My recommendation here is the Bard gets a couple of level spikes. My personal recommendation is to go with the College of Sword Bard because of its very powerful ability, the Slashing Flourish. This just basically lets you attack a second target if it's nearby. And there's also a ranged version of it which lets you use the bow attack on 2 targets, and you can actually target the same target twice. These 2 abilities are broken, but the reason I'm recommended actually to multi-class here, and I don't always recommend multi-classing for new-time players, but your Bard can be a better, it can be a better Paladin or a really good type of fighter. These are 2 multi-classes that work very well. But some other multi-classes, the Warlock, if you take 5 levels of the Warlock and 6 levels of your College of Sword Bard, it gets the extra attack stacking outside of Honor Mode. And this means that your College of Sword Bard, which can also attack 2 targets at once with 3 attacks, can attack technically 6 people per action, which is absolutely absurd. So it has some of the greatest multi-class in the game. But my personal recommendation would be to take the College of Sword Bard for level 3. The Valor Bard can also work, and if you're in Honor Mode, you could go with like the Lore Bard and add in like the Warlock, but we're going to go with the College of Sword. At level 6, you get your extra attack, which means per action you can now attack twice, and this is the point we would like to multi-class. Now, the Bard gets a very special ability at level 10, so we typically want to just do a 2-level dip unless you're going all in on like something like the Warlock, but I guess the best choices would be the either Paladin or the Fighter 2 levels for Action Surge. My recommendation is the Paladin. It's a Charisma-based class, and it gives us 2 really good abilities that we want. Divine Smite. This adds a 2d8 of radiant damage onto our melee attacks, and the reason I'm recommending this even in the first place is our Slashing Flourish. You can turn on reaction smites, and you can Slashing Flourish smite 2 people. It burns through spell slots faster than anything else in the game, but if you want the highest Nova damage, that's the way to do it. Furthermore, Command is such a good spell. This can also later on be done as a bonus action. and the Bard would have to use their magical secrets to get this otherwise. So this is a crazy combination, and then you also get a fighting style and martial weapons. If you start with the Paladin, you get heavy armor proficiency. So as mentioned, this ends up being a better Paladin than the Paladin is. It's weird, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I hate to miss the level 10 magical secrets though, because you get access to Banishing Smite, which is normally not accessible to anyone else. Now the Hexblade adds it in. But my recommendation is you can grab Spirit Guardians, which is such a good spell because this just gives you damage in an area effect around you. Otherwise, you could have grabbed Command here, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's the Spirit Guardians, and I love Cone of Cold at close range because that 64 damage can be doubled if the right conditions like wet are set up, or chilled, which can then make the target take 128 max damage, which is pretty crazy. I also like to go with this combo here. Spirit Guardians for the area effect damage, and Elementals. These are just really good. You could use a scroll for it. However, getting a Water Elemental can set up chilled for someone else to do cold damage is amazing, but it just draws aggro away from your team. So this is the best like protecting kind of damage output build. It's actually absurd, and that's the reason I want to recommend multi-classing with a Bard, just because it really is the best build in the game, in my opinion. But I do want to recap. 6 levels of Bard, 6 levels of the Hexblade Warlock is my recommendation for like a Charisma 3 attacker if you want to go all in on offense. I personally like 10 levels of the Bard, 2 of the Paladin, or 10 levels of the Bard, 2 of the Fighter for action surge. But yeah, at that point you become the best melee attacker or smiter or really whatever role you're going for in the game. So yeah, the Bard, jack of all trades, but it can be a master of one really easily and just crazy damage output. Now, next up is the Cleric. There's 3 subclasses I'd actually recommend here for a first-time player, but the one that stands above all others, in my opinion, is the Light Domain Cleric. It fits lore-wise if you're going to use Shadowheart in your party later on. A lot of people are tempted to go towards the Life Domain. I just want to mention the Life Domain actually doesn't give you any new spells, and the Cleric's best thing is actually to be proactive versus reactive. When you're proactive, you protect your team. When you're reactive, you heal back the damage your team lost, and that loses your action usage. It kind of ruins the action economy, as they call it in this game. The Tempest Domain is kind of a spellcaster at that point. It's really good. It's got Ice Storm and a bunch of lightning damage spells, but I would actually recommend for the first-time player to do this particular setup. And the reason being is it's just going to help out making the game a lot easier and helping you understand the concepts of it. So with the Light Domain, you do get a warding flare ability here, which you can prevent an ally from getting attacked and give disadvantage to the attacker. My recommendation actually is to play a Light Domain and get these specific pieces of gear, courtesy of the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki. The Luminous Armor, which you can find at the Selionite Outpost in Act 1. The Luminous Gloves, which are in the Ruined Battlefield in Act 2. The Holy Lance Helm, which is in Rosymorn Monastery in Act 1, which whenever an attacker misses you, they take radiant damage, which is going to proc our gear, and the Boots of Stormy Clamor, which you can buy from Omalum in the Ebon Lake Grotto. So basically, this Act 1 item, whenever you deal radiant damage, you create a radiant shockwave. This creates a 3-meter radius where every enemy in that gets a -2 to their attack rolls. They get what's called a radiating orb. You may have heard those before. It's extremely powerful. You can set that up very quickly with that, and with the Luminous Gloves. These are all items that are very early on in the game, so you can use them throughout the entire game. This, whenever you deal radiant damage, the enemy gets 2 turns of radiating orbs. Spirit Guardians, which is the best cleric spell, means you can apply these in an area of effect around you just by running around. And then when the enemies have the -10 to their attack rolls, which is the lowest that they can get, with the Holy Lance Helm, if they miss you with an attack, they take radiant damage, which then procs all your gear again and spreads the radiating orbs in an area of effect. Since we're applying conditions, we can use the Boots of Stormy Clamor from Act 1 to get reverberation. Now, where this all ties together, and the reason I'm recommending these 4 pieces of gear is because they're really easy to get, but 2, because reverberation is really funny. Whenever you walk around with Spirit Guardians, if someone runs towards you and they get affected by the reverberation, they can get knocked prone, and when an enemy goes prone on their turn, they lose their turn. So you're basically protecting your teammates by giving them up to -10 to attack rolls, which is basically giving your entire team a +10 to their armor class, by the way. So really good. And then with this, it's just really easy to set up and you don't have to do a whole lot. In your combat, you're going to set up, use Spirit Guardians and just kind of run around, do a couple of radiant spells. You're likely not going to heal too much, but you can if you want to, and that's my recommendation. There's also gear for healing. That's Act 1, like the Whispering Promise that you can buy from Volo, and there's also the Gloves, the Hellrider's Pride, which you can get from Zevlor. So there's healing gear if you really want to heal, but I'd actually just recommend running a Light Cleric. It's so much better. And next we have the Druid. Now, the Druid's honestly, in my opinion, the most underrated class in the game. People underrate them heavily online because it's kind of like the Bard where it's not like a full-on caster. You don't get access to the spells that like a Sorcerer or a Wizard would get. And it's not like a full-on like tanky class. And that's kind of where I'd classify them. Your wild shape is your biggest benefit, the ability to just change into an animal. Between the different subclasses, the Star Druid being the newest one, Each of them has access to just the regular old wild shape forms that they normally get access to. You get the owlbear form once you hit level 6, which is the best choice in my opinion for most situations without having to think too hard about it. But I want to recommend playing a tanky version of the Circle of the Moon. So Halsa and Jahara that you get in your party are all druids, and they come as Circle of the Land or Circle of the Moon, respectively. My recommendation, Circle of the Land is not a bad class, honestly. It's a pretty good spellcaster. It gets Lightning Bolt and Cone of Cold, which are two powerful evocation spells. But the Circle of the Moon is, my recommendation for the tip is play Circle of the Moon and play them as a tank. If you don't have a tank like a Barbarian on your team, running a Circle of the Moon Druid and just their huge health pool is so useful. They get their Lunar Mend here, which is a bonus action, expending spell slots to keep them healed. And Druids have a class feature, not a subclass feature, of getting an additional attack in wild shape. So at level 5, they get the extra attack, and at level 10, they get another extra attack. And each Druid gets access to Owlbear and the Panther form. Now, the Moon Druid can do this as a bonus action. That's why I like this class so much, because you can go into your Owlbear form and then just start attacking right away. And it's honestly a very tanky form. Now, you can have your team apply healing buffs before you get into combat, and that's going to be ideal. You also ignore any resistance to non-magical damage, which is nice too. The thing I want to mention about the Druid is it's tanky because you got all these summons that are going to hold aggro for you. The Woodland Being can do Spike Growth. You can pop down a Grasping Vine or even Ice Storm before you go into your wild shape. And you can hold a concentration on things like Wildfire whenever you're in your wild shape form. Everyone also gets access to the Dilophosaurus form, which is decent. It can help buff or reduce enemies' armor class, but the Moon Druid gets the Air Myrmidon here, which can use the Stunning Flail, and it can attack 3 times. So yeah, you get that improved Wild Strike, and then in this, you can stun 3 targets per turn, which is actually pretty crazy. And you get the Conjure Elemental, so you can actually summon in 1/2 to potentially stun 4 targets. When a target's stunned, they lose their turn. It's crazy. Now, note, you would have to multi-class to get the weapon proficiencies, funny enough, so I'd actually recommend adding in a level of the fighter at the start for Constitution saving throw proficiency and heavy armor if you wanted it. But my tip for the Druid is you also get medium armor proficiency, so you can actually make yourself very tanky. If you're playing a Moon Druid or if you're playing a Land Druid, my recommendation is to always be using the form that's going to give you the most health, the Owlbear being one of the best choices, because when you go into your Owlbear form, it's 94 health there at level 10, and then you also have your Lunar Mend to be able to replenish your health. You got 2 wild shape charges per short rest, and there's an item that'll actually give you a 3rd one, so you can go in a fight, go into your Wildbear form, you get 94 health, tear that down, 94 health again, tear that down, you get 94 health again. And on top of all that, since you do have a lower armor class as a Owlbear, the enemies are more likely to attack you. With a 15 armor class, and there's an item you can give yourself a +2 to that, so a 17 armor class. Honestly, this is one of the best ways. I actually think this is the tankiest way to play, is like just use your Owlbear spam in the Moon Druid, and this will basically soak up attacks for your team. And it's got some pretty useful attacks as well, but yeah, the Moon Druid is an underrated tank, and even if you're using your other forms, go into the Owlbear and you just can stall. So yeah, that's my tip. Now the Fighter is a very straightforward class. This is kind of a tricky one to give a tip on. My recommendation is to not multi-class. Now I know multi-classing, when I said to the Bard, multi-classing the Fighter, when you play a Fighter, just stay Fighter. Level 11 is when they get the improved extra attack. That's their best ability, and you don't want to mess with that, because if you do, you're probably better off playing like a Paladin, which gets Divine Smite on top of what the Fighter already does until level 11. So yeah, that's kind of my tip. Also, the Eldritch Knight Fighter got a huge buff, but the Battlemaster can also pretty strong if you're playing a High Elf. The High Elf can pick Booming Blade as their cantrip for their racial cantrip, which is crazy because Booming Blade is just so powerful on anyone, especially a martial class. But my recommendation is actually to play the Eldritch Knight. It got buffed not just because of Booming Blade, which adds an additional 2d8 Thunder and 3d8 if they move. It scales up as you level. But the other thing with the Eldritch Knight is they also get the new spell Shadow Blade, which is broken. It makes you do a 2d8 of psychic damage. There's no weapon in the game that does like a 2d8 naturally of damage. And psychic damage can be easily doubled at the end of Act 2. There's an item you can get that gives off an aura. Everyone nearby takes double psychic damage, meaning your 2d8 becomes 2d8 times 2, which is crazy. So play Eldritch Knight if you want a really easy time. Booming Blade also will proc their war magic, so you can get 4 attacks. You do your attack, and then a bonus action attack on top. But yeah, my personal recommendation, don't multi-class with the Fighter. Keep her simple. Eldritch Knight is the best subclass in my opinion now, but if you're playing a High Elf, a Battlemaster with Booming Blade is better. So those are the 2 best. Easy S tier class and straightforward. Now Monk is a really fun class. One of the highest the highest single target damage class in the game. My recommendation for the Monk, not my tip, but a recommendation, is to multi-class this with the Rogue Thief, because the Monk's best ability is their bonus action. It lets them punch twice per bonus action. So the Rogue Thief can add an extra bonus action, which really spikes up the damage. And all Monk subclasses do benefit from that, so that's kind of like a bonus tip, but They are stat hungry. You want high strength because Tavern Brawler is the most powerful ability in the game. It's a feat that you can get at level 4, which adds double strength modifier onto your unarmed attacks. Now, my actual recommendation is, it's difficult to do it this way, but I'm going to recommend it anyways, just because it's so much better this way. You can get items to boost your strength in Act 1. There's potions, but there's also a Club of Hill Giant Strength, which is very easy to use, and you can actually put in your offhand and still punch. That's the kind of cool thing about it. This will also let you spec all the way in on your wisdom, putting it up to 16, and then you can put like 14 constitution and 17 dex and use the hags here if you wanted to. High dex is important because the higher our dex, the more we have initiative, meaning we go first, and you want to go first as a monk because you're a single target deleter. This means if there's someone in your initiative order, you can break them out of them and free up somebody else in your team, which is actually extremely valuable. It means you're going to take less damage, and that's why the monk wants dexterity too. They're, again, very stat hungry. They need wisdom, constitution, dexterity, and strength to be like in their tip-top shape. And to get the Hill Giant Strength Club here, you got to go to the Arcane Tower in the Underdark, and you're going to break the Stool of Hill Giant Strength, and this is the item you get. It's literally just a peg from it, but it sets your strength to 19. Now, the trick here is you're going to put this in your offhand, you're going to put something in your main hand. You can go to somebody else, and you're going to go into their inventory, make sure they're not holding anything, and you're going to go in, and you're going to basically take the item that they have equipped, or that you have equipped. So you're just going to go ahead and take that, and you can see now my character has their basically ability to punch, and they have the club there to put their strength up. I don't have Tavern Brawler equipped, but the thing is, with this type of class, your attacks and bonus actions can deal over 100 damage once you get to the end game. It's very powerful. I have builds on it. You can check those out if you're curious, but yeah, you want to compensate your strength somehow. Auntie Ethel also sells strength potions in Act 1, and you can buy them from Auntie Ethel. They're not too expensive, and there's actually ways to get kind of cheap gold. My recommendation is also, if you're doing that, to take your character, level them up, or respec them at Wizards and take them there, and you can actually level them up, and it refreshes their inventory. You can get 3 of them every time you refresh it, so you can get your entire game's worth of potions just right there without much stress, or you can do the trick that I showed. Now, I did say earlier the Paladin should multi-class with the Bard because it makes him a better Paladin. The Paladin is a half caster. With 2 levels of Paladin to get Divine Smite, the Bard gives them the full spell slot progression up to level 6, so they can smite level 4, which they normally don't have access to for the highest possible damage. But I'm actually just going to give you a tip for playing as a Paladin because it's my favorite class. I do love the Bard and Paladin. They're 2 of my favorites in Sorcerer. But the thing with the Paladin is it's a good multi-class with the Warlock too. Like the Paladin is a very powerful multi-class because it gives you weapon proficiencies and extra attack. With the Warlock, it gives you the 3 attacks at level 10. So that's even faster than a fighter gets their extra attack. That was my first playthrough build, and it was crazy because you get the extra attack at level 5, extra attack at level 5. Powerful. The Bard and the Paladin, strong, and 7 levels or 6 levels of the Sorcerer with the Paladin is also strong as well. But I'm going to tell you a tip for just playing as a Paladin. My personal favorite subclass is the Oath of Vengeance, but the Oath of the Crown is nice because it also adds Spirit Guardians. But one funny thing about this, and they've never patched it, so I'm assuming it's a game way the game is meant to be played. Vow of Enmity from the Vengeance Paladin. Gain advantage on attack rolls against an enemy. You can apply this on yourself, make yourself angry, and then you get free advantage on attack rolls. It's silly, but it works for 10 whole turns. It uses your channel oath charge, but it's very, very much worth it. It's actually crazy. This Paladin also gets Hold Person and Misty Step, which are great because you can use there's a item you can get later called the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, which lets you get Hold Person as a bonus action, which you can then go ahead and smite them. But the last, I guess, a mini extra tip here is the Aura of Protection. It's meant to protect your teammates in a 3-meter radius. This is a small radius. Stick together with this and you get a bonus to saving throws. This is against every saving throw, so it's going to protect them from spells. It's going to protect them from crowd control. It's just a really good thing to have for your team. And stick close. Unfortunately, it's a very small radius. Now, the Ranger is a half caster similar to the Paladin. I like the Ranger, but I feel like this is a class that kind of struggles in D&D to have an identity because a fighter gets 3 attacks. They actually have the Arcane Archer, which is if you want to play an Archer, it's better to play that subclass. And it's actually better to play the Battlemaster Archer too than a Ranger because they only get 2 attacks and the abilities they get aren't really that great. Ensnaring Strike is kind of their special ability there. You can ensnare a target. They also get Hunter's Mark, but I showed you the Vengeance Paladin who also gets that, and the Vengeance Paladin can also smite on top of that. So yeah, if you really wanted to get the subclass for Hunter's Mark, you're better off playing the Paladin. And Snaring Strike's okay for kiting enemies, but Ray of Frost also is good at kiting. It reduces enemies' movement speed by 3, which is likely enough to kite them most through the game. And enemies usually shake out of this pretty quickly because it's a strength save. So my tip for the Ranger. Now, 2 of the classes you actually have to take to level 11, similar to the Fighter. The Beastmaster gets their best summon ability at level 11, so that's why you take it there. And the Hunter gets their volley at level 11. Both of these are going to feel weak until the late game. So my personal recommendation is to play Gloomstalker. They get an extra attack at the first round of combat. Think about how often you get into combat. That's an extra attack at the very start. It doesn't cost an action or anything. You also get a +3 to your initiative, so you go first. And then you also get a bonus action hide and ability to turn invisible. You get dark vision up to 24 meters, and you get disguise self. So any of the Githyanki weapons you see, you can turn yourself into Githyanki, equip it, and then remove the disguise. You keep all the benefits as if you were that race. So my recommendation for the Ranger is to play Gloomstalker until late game. And then if you want to play Beastmaster or Hunter, you can play it at the late game. The Gloomstalker basically does everything else that these two do, and just a little bit better. And if you want to play the Gloomstalker the full game, 5 levels of this, because you'll get Misty Step, 3 levels of either the Assassin Rogue or the Thief Rogue, and then 4 levels of the Fighter Battlemaster. Now the Rogue, unfortunately the weakest in combat class, but it's great outside of combat, and that's kind of what I wanted to focus on. You can get a lot of skills similar to the Bard. The Sword Bard, as mentioned. The Sword Bard is, if you want to play a Rogue, play the Sword Bard. It gives you kind of the same idea, but it's charisma based and just a lot better with the extra attack. And it can do spell casting, so you can turn yourself invisible and actually feel like a rogue. The Rogue is good for the skills that you get, because yeah, you can get sleight of hand proficiency if you wanted to be a lock picker, but you can also do that with really anyone. There's items in the early act, the Cat's Grace that you can get from the Graceful Cloth, giving advantage on dexterity checks like sleight of hand and stealth. So there's ways to get some of these abilities without playing a Rogue, but if you really want to play a Rogue, my recommendation, this is another one that you're probably going to want to multi-class because they just lack that extra attack. So that's a big power spike that they just don't have that every other class has once they hit level 5 or level 6. My personal recommendations for multi-classes, there's actually a few really good ones. The Rogue has a few different subclasses that are powerful when combined with another class, like the Thief, for example. Any class that has a powerful bonus action is going to benefit from this. The Berserker Barbarian has a throw or a melee attack that they can do as a bonus action, so this is really good to combine. But I mentioned the Monk get their bonus action that does 100+ damage with fast hands. It's crazy. The Swashbuckler is really fun because it's charisma based, so the Swashbuckler can actually multi-class with the Sword Bard. I'd recommend doing 4 levels of the Swashbuckler and then going the rest, like 6 levels, into the Sword Bard, or also the Hexblade. The Hexblade's charisma based as well. It gets an extra attack, and it's also spellcaster. So if you're going Swashbuckler, Sword Bard, or the Hexblade for the full spellcaster mix. The Assassin, great with the Ranger, Gloomstalker, as mentioned previously. They get the extra initiative, or they get their attack basically back. If you attack, you get your action back, and you also have advantage on attacks against creatures that haven't taken a turn. So you basically are great for just nuke damage, and you also get critical hits against surprise creatures. If you want to play the Arcane Trickster, it's just the weakest subclass in the game. I'd recommend not, but you could do 3 levels of this and then the Blade Singing Wizard. That way you get at least an extra attack, and you can kind of use the Mage Hand Legend of them all. But yeah, those I'd actually recommend downloading a modded subclass like Incognito Burritos, 5e Ranger subclass, or Rogue subclasses, which adds in a bunch more of these, the Book of Rogues. But again, Thief, Swashbuckler, Assassin, and Arcane Trickster all have their own good multi-classes that make them better. They just don't scale well. Their sneak attacks, they're a big deal, but I guess another tip I will mention if you don't want a multi-class is to set up your sneak attack. You can use the Risky Ring, which will always give you an advantage, but enemies will have advantage on attacks against you. And the Rogue, oddly enough, is kind of tanky. They got the Uncanny Dodge, which can protect them once they hit level 5. So they're actually kind of defensive in a sense. And they also get advantage on dexterity saves, similar to the Barbarian, so that is good too. Now, the Sorcerer is, in my opinion, the most powerful pure spellcaster. This is because they get meta magics, which can power up their spells. And there's actually a very underrated one that I do want to talk about here. Now, if you're new to the game, Quicken Spell is extremely powerful because basically you cast the spells in action. You do, like, let's say, like Fireball. You then get a bonus action, Quicken Spell, which lets you then cast another Fireball. That's 2 Fireballs. It's more than 1, which the Wizard is only capable of 1. So yeah, that's really crazy. And then if you throw in things like Haste, you can do 3 Fireballs. If you add in the Rogue Thief, which I wouldn't recommend, but you get another bonus action, you can do another Fireball. So yeah, you get the idea. You can do a lot of spells at once. But I actually want to recommend the extended spell ability here, because this actually powers up some of the shorter duration spells into becoming just crazy strong. So yeah, Quicken Spell is great. I'm also going to quickly mention Twin Spell, because you can use Twin Spell on Haste, so you can apply the Haste to yourself and somebody else. That means you get your action back to cast another spell, and then whoever you cast it on can then do 2 actions. Now, if you're in honor mode, it won't let fighters do 6 attacks in a turn, but what you can do with that is you can put on another spellcaster if you're in honor mode, or if you're not in honor mode, they do get the 3 attack extras, so it's crazy. But the tip that I want to give for the Sorcerer is Extended Spell. This is something that's very underrated because it basically will turn the duration of any spell into 2 turns. So if you got Confusion, it then becomes 6 turns. If you got the Crown of Madness, it becomes 6 turns as well. Some of the 10 turns, these don't matter. We don't care about the 20 turns. The thing we would really care about is Globe of Invulnerability. This is the best spell in the game. For 1 sorcery point, we can make it last 6 turns. Globe of Invulnerability means your entire team takes no damage inside of that globe. I don't know why that happened. Well, yeah, you get the idea. Basically, you can use Extended Spell to make some of your powerful spells even more powerful. And some of the durations, like things like Crown of Madness or Enthrall, things that don't normally have a very high turn duration, can be very powerful when this is applied. And it also works in Command. Command is actually kind of crazy if you're going to do like a multi-class with the Paladin, for example, because then your commands, if you get a bonus action ability like from the Band of Mystic Scoundrel, you can have a 2-turn command, which is just crazy. The Warlock got the biggest buff out of any class in Baldur's Gate 3 with Patch 8. Now, I would recommend, if you're not in Honor Mode, the Warlock is the best multi-classer. I did say the Bard in multi-classes really well, but the Warlock is great because the extra attack stacks outside of Honor Mode, so in your first playthrough, you're likely going to get that. It means you can get an extra attack on a class faster than the Fighter would at level 11. And in fact, if you went with Hexblade 5 and the Fighter 5, it gets its extra attack at level 10, which is sooner than it normally would, which is actually very powerful. But I'd recommend the Hexblade here. Now, the best thing about this is 1 level gives you Charisma skill in your weapon. So if you want to just do 1 level of this and go into the Eldritch Knight, you can then do a Charisma-based Eldritch Knight. But the thing is, you get the 2 best cantrips in the game by far, with Eldritch Blast being able to attack multiple enemies at later levels, and Booming Blade, which does pretty great damage, and it sets up a lot of your gear in the game. But the thing is, with the Hexblade, it gets a Ghost at level 6, it gets some of the best spells in the game, and you get the Hexblade's Curse. You also get medium armor proficiency and martial weapon proficiencies. So yeah, you got pretty much everything going on with the Hexblade. It's the true like caster, melee attacker hybrid subclass of the game. So yeah, this is a really good one, and my recommendation is if you like multi-classing, this is the best class to multi-class pretty much anything with. But if you don't, play a Hexblade. You're going to enjoy it. It's strong, tanky, it can deal a ton of damage. It gets Shadowblade, and you can take the Shadowblade up to a 4d8 version, which is higher than what the Eldritch Knight Fighter is capable of, and that can be doubled as well. So it's 4d8 times 2. You can hit for over 100 damage easily on your melee attacks, which is just crazy. It's strong, fun, tanky, it does it all. And the last class is the Wizard. Now, its strength is not its spell casting outright, it's its utility. They can prepare more spells than anyone else. You get to pick 6 of them at level 1 and 3 cantrips. Now the thing is, with these spells, you can also learn them from scrolls. This gives you the most versatility in combat because at any time you can press K, open up your spell book, and swap your spells out, which the Sorcerer can't do, the Warlock can't do. They have to replace them at level up. The other nice thing about this is that you can actually take a single level dip with the Wizard. Let's say you want the Sorcerer, the level 11 ability is typically best. Adding the Wizard lets you learn scrolls, which means you can take the Wizard and learn things like your Conjure Elementals, which don't require a high intelligence. And then you can also learn Globe of Invulnerability or other things like that, which are really nice because they don't require what stat you're using. So the tip here is to use your Wizard's spellbook, honestly. Its biggest ability is the ability to do that. My other recommendation is things like the Knock spell once you get to level 2 or level 3. It's a level 2 spell that can open up doors. The Shar Temple in Act 2 can be easily you can go through it right quick with the Wizard because they can learn Knock. You can also use Scrolls of Knock, but it's really just easier to have your Wizard just learn it and prepare it at the time it's needed. They also get things like Featherfall, a lot of other useful spells that you want to be buffing up your team with. The Wizard's useful for that, so... And if you want to be a really good spellcaster, you can change Gale into a Sorcerer, and it can still make sense, very powerful. He actually kind of feels like he should be a Sorcerer because he was technically like born with magical powers, which is a Sorcerer. So yeah, my recommendation for the Wizard, use your spellbook and use all the things that come with it. And if you do multi-class, the Wizard really does like to multi-class with the Cleric, and it can kind of unlock some true power because it gives a Cleric spells they normally wouldn't get access to. So Light Domain Cleric or a Tempest, which can max roll its lightning damage, becomes really good. Use Knock, use all the other tools, and you'll have a good time with the Wizard. So yeah, I hope that video was useful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave in the comments below. I'm usually pretty quick to get back comments as soon as possible. And if you're new to Baldur's Gate 3, again, feel free to comment on any of my videos. I'm always here to help. So hope you guys all have a great day. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you all in the next one.